Hi, this is chapter 25. So basically, it's talking about history of life on Earth from the biological standpoint. So we're gonna start from very, very beginning. Not very, very beginning, but like very, very early condition of Earth. So let's get to it. Well, biologists and many evidence indicated that Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, and the first life form appears on Earth about 3.8 billion years ago. And so, well, the question becomes, well, how does Earth came to life, and how does, well, in a way, in other words, how does life come about? So there's something that has to happen in order to kind of for lives to occur. So we know if it has to start from nothing, first thing you need to build some kind of small organic molecules that can be found. And this, after that, the small molecule needs to turn into something that's much bigger, macromolecule. For example, like protein and nucleic acids. And then from that, it has to turn into something like protocells, basically the early type of cells that has small droplets on their membrane. And lastly, for this part, we need self-replicating molecules, so you can have basically the blueprint of life carry on as a split out. So the first generation material, we think is most likely it's going to be RNA, and so we also have first catalyst, which is also a form of RNA, called ribosome. So next, we got the theory. Okay, so back then, well, not that far ago, Oprin and Holden, there are two scientists. Basically, they're trying to hypothesize what's going on the first part of Earth. So basically, what they think it's the early atmosphere on Earth already have some elements. Okay, they have water, they have N2, CO2, H2, H2S, methane, amine. Oh my gosh, ammonia. Sorry, my apology. And then with those compound, they need some kind of energy to kind of form different kind of other compound and synthesize into organic compounds. So what they think it's the lightning and the UV radiation. Back then, there's just not enough air, oxygens in the air to kind of filter out this UV radiation. So UV radiation basically just kind of like coming in freely. So from that powerful UV energy and the lightning occurring back then on Earth, they think that that's how they kind of create other types of organic compounds. So they have a name called primitive soup. So basically, it's saying that these condition forms a really good organic compound in the water, basically, and then that's kind of like the primitive soup that will help us to create some kind of protein and larger, more complex macro molecule like proteins, like a different kind of RNA. So what happened is, well, since there's a hypothesis, you gotta test it out. So Miller and Urey, two scientists, what they did is they recreate this hypothesis in laboratory. So they simulate the condition in early Earth, and then what they found is these conditions actually can help the environment to produce amino acid. And amino acid later we'll be talking about, not right now, not in this chapter, but later on chapters, well, earlier chapters, we will be talking about amino acids. They're basically building blocks for proteins. So these conditions actually can create different kind of amino acid which are building blocks for protein. So they approve the Oprin and Holden's theory actually can work. Okay, so after all that stuff, so now we know amino acid exists. So they basically, not they, but scientists start to think about, well, The early form of cells probably are what we call the protocells, and the self-replicating RNA, it's a very very key components to this theory that they are the first type of cell. So protocell is very very simple. Okay, they're not complex like the cells in our body, and they have very very simple RNA string. They don't have DNA, but the key is that they have RNA, which is a blueprint to replicate the same type of cell. So they do have that, so they can replicate it by themselves, as you can see right here in this pictures in this slide. You can see the reproduction process of protocell, basically reproducing daughter cells, if you will. Okay, and well, you guys will be thinking about how do we know these things and how do we find out if there's any other animal. So what happened is we actually have fossil records. Okay, and this is kind of how we kind of figure out how life on Earth was created and which one comes first, which one comes later, and so on and so forth. So these are 4 different ways that we can basically reconstruct our history. First thing, it's sedimentary rock, so sediment. Okay, and second thing, it's mineralized objects, usually body structure. You can almost think of like the Jurassic Park movie. They have the mineralized components of certain insects, etc., etc. And sorry, I'm back. Some of the organic matter actually can be found in amber. So either they're frozen, okay, or they were trapped in treetop tar, okay, tree tar. No, like tar, okay, not tree tar. Sorry, my apology. And what happened? It's there's some problem as far as how we reconstruct history, because not every single records was preserved because there's nobody there or no animal actually think of like, oh, let's record our history. So it never happened. So actually there are some gaps. So the record is not exactly complete, but at least we have a lot of evidence coming from these organic matter, from mineralized, some kind of body structures, and sedimentary rocks. So all these will help us kind of to recreate this history of blueprint, history book, if you will, of how animals and how organisms come about. So this is kind of a picture that's also in your book that you can see that kind of it points out how many million years, these numbers are million years all the way until like right here. So how many million years ago basically were those things were found, and what are they, and what do they represent, and all sorts cool detail stuff can be found in your book. I'm gonna talk about the big pictures, so I'm gonna go to the next slide. So there's 2 way of how they date things. How, in other words, the 2 ways for them to kind of figure out what's going on with as far as like which thing comes first, which one comes second. So one is less accurate, the other one's pretty accurate. This one is called relative dating. Basically, this is not an accurate age of certain structure or certain fossil. Basically, we can see if you cut a mountain in half, right in the middle from top to bottom, you can probably see layers of rocks or sediments or excuse me, or many other things. And from these layers, we can assume that the bottom layer is probably older. Okay, just because the rain kind of wash off the first top layer, so the top one will always be newer than the bottom one. So we can do that, and that's what we call relative dating. Okay. Second thing, it's radiometric dating. So basically, we're talking about a special name, basically called half-life. So how many years for 50% of the original sample to decay? So just to explain that, let's jump to the next slide. So what you have here is this is originally how much isotope it's in certain organism. Okay, and what scientists found out that isotope actually decay very regularly, and the time for them to decay, half of them, so half of them to be gone, if you will, it's a constant time. So let's say you have the whole thing right here. After, let's say, 1 million years, you only have half of what you had originally, and then another million year you have half of what you have right here. So it becomes, from one becomes 1 second, what becomes one half, and becomes 1/4, eventually 1/8, and 1/16, and so on and so forth. So because this pattern, they have discovered that certain isotope, for example, carbon 12, carbon 13, carbon 14, they're used for isotope to do this kind of carbon dating. So basically, this is kind of a way for them to more accurately pinpoint exactly when an animal was dead or was preserved in the sediment. So now let's talk about the geological time scale. Because we're talking about so many millions years ago, so there's actually different names for it. Okay, so right here from top, my pronunciation is a little bit off, and also there's different way to pronounce these words. So eon, which is the longest time, era, period, and epoch. Okay, so longest to shortest. This one is the shortest. This one's the longest, and it's important to know these four because every single time frame in history can be represented in those four, and then it's kind of like a big bracket, and then you get within the big bracket you have a smaller bracket, and then eventually you have parentheses, and so on and so forth with math problem. So the same thing with this one. So present day can be described as these four. Okay, so you have the eon part representation, era part of representation, period part, and epoch part of representation. Oh, sorry, I'm moving this. My bad. Okay, so for us to be right here, we have four different ways to kind of narrow down which part does human exist in the world of Earth's lifespan. So that's that. And next one. And this is basically another analogy. So for this one, it's kind of like a linear. So from top to bottom, it's kind of a straight line. For this one, it's like a clock, like what we're more familiar with. So basically, all they did is they kind of wrap around this clock, if you will. And this is billion years. So because it's, a little bit over like 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth was originated. So this is kind of like how we rewrite this, and these are different important event that is around our history, Earth history. So that's how they construct this. Okay, so these are key events in the history that you guys need to know. When was the first prokaryote? Prokaryote basically talking about single cell that doesn't have a membrane around its DNA. 2.1 billion years ago, first eukaryote cells. Eukaryote is talking about cells that has a membrane around its DNA, or it also has other components within the cell. And then this 1.2 billion years ago, first multicellular eukaryote. So different components within that cell was found 1.2 billion years ago. 500 million years ago, colonization of land by fungi. So different kind of plants and animal eventually came to the land about 500 million years ago. And I'm gonna stop right here, and I'm gonna pick it up from the next video.